This is why the Ole Miss Rebels are going to defeat the Oklahoma Sooners. We give you the answer key before tomorrow's test.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we dive into Saturday's showdown between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Oklahoma Sooners. This game is a must-win for the Rebels, a critical opportunity for the offense to get back on track. Brent Venables' defense, by the way, is no joke. But with Lane Kiffin's creative play calling and Jackson Dart leading the charge after a much-needed week off, expect the Rebels to fire on all cylinders. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This, like always, is my favorite episode of the week. The Why Ole Miss Wins episode is fantastic. I like the thought process behind it, and we're just going to get right into it. These are the three main points, the reason that I think that Ole Miss is going to defeat the Oklahoma Sooners. I think the Ole Miss offense is going to get back on track against a very good OU defense. They are very high up, higher than Ole Miss in sacks at the moment. They're good at getting after the quarterback. Brent Venables is known for being able to get after that quarterback and force mistakes. That defense is very opportunistic. The OU defense is good. That's my point. But Lane Kiffin has an off week to get ready. When he has an off week, he generally does pretty well when he comes back. I'm expecting this offensive unit to be really on track against the Sooners. The second thing is the biggest matchup advantage that Ole Miss is going to have in this game is the Ole Miss defensive line versus the OU offensive line. And when you look at these stats of where Ole Miss sits in scoring defense and tackles for loss and sacks going against an OU defense and seeing where they sit in sacks and third down conversions and rushing offense and scoring offense, you can see that this defense versus the OU offense is where the rubber meets the road in this game. And it's the reason that Seth Luttrell got fired by the Oklahoma Sooners in the lead up to this game. And Joe John Finley is going to be calling the plays on Saturday. But Ole Miss has the advantage over the OU offensive line because of injuries. Whatever reason, Ole Miss has that advantage. Walter Nolan, Princely Iman is likely going to be back. He's listed as probable on the availability report as of Wednesday night. And we'll see exactly how that goes. But that defensive line has a chance to be a game wrecker, essentially, in this game. And the third one, Lane Kiffin kind of needs this game to look right for recruiting. You have Caleb Cunningham on campus. You have a lot of big names coming into Oxford. This is the real tree game, a whole bunch of chance to move the program forward as you see it, as you want to do it. Now you have to go out there and perform. The offense cannot struggle with potentially the top recruit in the state, in the country for Ole Miss, essentially, on campus this weekend. He's currently committed to Alabama. You're playing that tug-of-war game. You need to look right in this game, period. So my take is Ole Miss is going to get back on track against the Oklahoma Sooners Saturday offensively. I know that is kind of a weak take a little bit, but Ole Miss after a bye week is going to be a big deal. Lane Kiffin has had 2 weeks to get right, a ton of self-scout, all of the stuff that we've talked about, all of the questions that we ask why. You know, the problem with the media today is if there's a problem, Ole Miss's offense has struggled, okay? Let's just go with that. The hypothesis is Ole Miss's offense has struggled. The problem is the media not really knowing what's going on and trying to determine the why of the situation. Oh, Jackson Dart got sacked 6 times against LSU. The offensive line was obviously terrible, and that became the narrative that the offensive line was terrible. But when you look at the stats, Jackson Dart averaged the second most time to throw that he's had all season long, only behind Kentucky. So if you know that, how do you figure out what to do? And my opinion is through self-scouting and all of that, Ole Miss is going to use a lot of more of the quick game. They're going to do things to get the ball out of Jackson Dart's hand, ways to scheme receivers open, not just the 40-yard duck and chucks that Ole Miss was doing against LSU. I mean, Juice Wells is a phenomenal athlete, but Ole Miss has been using him like DK Metcalf for the better part of the last 3 weeks. I think you're going to see Ole Miss get the ball in Juice Wells' hands early. I think you're going to see run on after the catch. If Trey Harris can play, he's listed on the injury availability report as questionable. So we'll see exactly what happens. As I told Jay Smith yesterday, nobody's going to really know about Trey Harris until warm-ups, essentially Saturday. But looking at the availability report, if he doesn't play, that means that Ole Miss has to use all their weapons a little bit differently. And if Ole Miss has practiced that way and is able to do that, I think you're going to see a pretty opened up offense with Juice Wells and Caden Lee and Caden Prieskorn and all the weapons kind of balanced being used. I mean, I talk all the time. Mike Leach, rest his soul, described balance as not 50-50 run pass. That wasn't balanced to him. Balance to him was the equal number of touches of all of his playmakers. And right now, the rut that Ole Miss has fallen into over the last 3 weeks is Trey Harris is 40% of the passing offense, nearly 50% of the passing touchdowns. Basically, everything is revolving around Trey Harris right now, to the point where you're throwing the ball downfield and forcing it to him. It was a funny joke. I guess it was after Georgia Southern that it said Trey Harris is the best receiver in the country, which he is. He legitimately is. And Jackson Dart bragged about, go to him over and over again, target him a bunch. And everybody kind of snickered at that because it was working. Well, now everybody in the SEC is sinking back deep, and you have taken this playmaker and depth that you've acquired over the last year, and you've kind of simplified it to what it was before. Ole Miss using the weapons they have, and they do have a ton of weapons right now. If you use those and spread them out and the running back rotation looks fine, this offense is going to be fine. There's nothing structurally wrong with this offense right now. Right now, there's nothing that a little self-scout against this offense can't fix. And if Ole Miss just runs the game plan they did against Penn State, against LSU last year, Texas A&M last year, if Ole Miss does that, this offense is going to be fine. This offense is going to score 40 points. This offense is going to do everything that we thought that they could do. The Jackson Dart that we expected to see in year 3 appears. So that is my take on that. Whenever somebody just says, okay, the offense is going wrong. Oh, the sack number's up high. The offensive line isn't doing very well. But why? Why? Is it the offensive line's fault that they're being asked to run block for 4 seconds? Can anybody run block for 4 seconds? Structurally, there is nothing wrong with this offense. There's some things that need to be cleaned up, like really cleaned up, and they need to do things to help out Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart has thrown 14 incompletions inside of 10 yards. The short passing game has been almost automatic. Utilize it. At least once or twice a series, make sure a mesh concept or something, an out concept, to where there's a little bit of variability so every pass isn't going 25 plus yards downfield. If Ole Miss does that, this offense is going to be fine. And I think this offense is going to do that. As I said, after a bye week, after the self-scout, with Lane Kiffin knowing exactly the score of this game and what is necessary, I think you're going to see this Ole Miss offense get right against a very good Oklahoma defense. They respect the pass rush just enough that you're going to see some quick game, that you are going to see Ole Miss break out and do some of the stuff that they need to do to become that next level offense. Because if Ole Miss becomes that next level offense and they're just consistent with it, with the defense that they have, they're not losing a game. I don't care who they're playing. But the offense has to get right. The offense cost them the Kentucky game. The offense cost them the LSU game. The offense has to get right. So that's just my opinion on that right now. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. The biggest advantage in this matchup, well, it's the Ole Miss defensive line versus the Oklahoma offensive line. It's a battle in the trenches, and it's going to be crucial. Find out why it is going to decide this game. Sports fans, if you haven't tried Prize Picks, now's your time. Prize Picks is the best way to get real money action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It is fast, easy, and fun. You'll have your picks locked in within 60 seconds. Right now, you can win up to 100 times your money by nailing just 4 correct picks. And don't worry if one of your picks doesn't hit. Thanks to Flex Play, you can still cash out with double your money. What makes Prize Picks even better is their injury insurance policy. If one of your players leaves the first half and doesn't return, your lineup still stays alive. No more ruined picks because of unexpected injuries. Sign up today for Prize Picks and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly when you play just $5. That's right. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So what are you waiting for? Run your game on Prize Picks and turn your sports knowledge into real cash today. Have y'all ever heard of the South's favorite pickle? I'm, of course, talking about Stewart's Cajun Dill pickles. If you think you don't like pickles, it's probably because you haven't tried these yet. These pickles are so fresh and crunchy with just the right amount of Cajun kick that keep you coming back for more. And they're not just delicious, they're also handmade by family-owned company on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. So every bite is packed with authentic Southern flavor. But Stewart's doesn't just stop at pickles. They've got a pickled green beans, okra, carrots, and asparagus too. They're perfect for spicing up your stack game. You can find these amazing products at Rouse's, Sullivan's, Corner Market in Hattiesburg, and even some Winn-Dixie's along the coast. Or if you prefer shopping online, head to thepickledstore.com and make sure you give them a like and follow on Facebook and Instagram as well. When you shop local and try these pickles, I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Stewart's Cajun Dill pickles, the South's favorite pickle. So the biggest mismatch in this game, and I hesitantly say mismatch because it's just a matchup advantage, essentially, and that is the Ole Miss defensive line against this Oklahoma offensive line. And Oklahoma this season has had problems. They've had real problems. We had Jay Smith on the show, and he said everything didn't line up the way that Oklahoma hoped. When you lose 5 wide receivers and you go through the line like an assembly line of turnover on your offensive line from injuries, everything bad just lined up all at once on one side of the ball. And that is kind of the story of the year for the Oklahoma Sooners. This is a talented football team. This is a more talented team than the Kentucky team that came into Oxford a few weeks back. This is a team that, if you look at the blue chip ratio, I'm doing air quotes right now again, the roster is like 70% 4- and 5-star players. There's talent on this team. Schematically, it has not worked out. Schematically, it's been a nightmare on the offensive side of the ball, and injuries have really hurt them. And honestly, we all kind of warned the Oklahoma Sooners that they needed to get the offensive line right before they came into the SEC, or else they were going to have problems. And lo and behold, this being a trench-based game in the SEC, that is exactly what happened. In fact, honestly, I can't figure out how they won that Auburn game other than Auburn just like messed up on it, because Oklahoma over the last 3 weeks have not played well. They have not. And when you look at their stats, the biggest stats of the Ole Miss defense, Ole Miss is number 7th in the country in sacks. They are number 2 in the country in tackles for loss. And they're number 2 in the country in scoring defense at 10.57 points per game. They've only given up a total of 6 touchdowns through 7 games this season. This defense is doing everything that they have to do. This is despite them having to be on the field for 32 to 33 minutes of the game. We talk about playing toward the defense and what Ole Miss needs to do to play to them all the time. But Ole Miss being in a time of possession deficit is at least a story going into this, because I think Oklahoma is going to try and replicate what Kentucky did a little bit as well. Now, if you look at the Oklahoma side of the ball, they are number 132 out of 134 in sacks with 29 this season. Their run offense, they gain 112 yards per game. That's good enough for 114th nationally. And the scoring offense is at about 22.1 points per game. That is 107 nationally. And it's actually worse than that because if you look at it, they scored a ton of points against Temple and they scored a good many against another G5 teams that is affecting their average. There's genuinely concern from Oklahoma fans that they're not going to be able to score the ball against not just Ole Miss's defense, but anybody's. And it gets worse than there for Oklahoma. Their third down percentage, as far as staying on the field offensively, is only at 27%. They've converted 28 times out of 101 total. Ole Miss, on the other hand, they're allowing teams to convert about a fourth of the time, 25.7%. They've allowed 29 conversions in 113 attempts. And a lot of that has to do with the talent that has emerged for Ole Miss. Suntarine Perkins, unbelievably good. He's turning into the monster that we all expected him to be along the defensive line. And he is likely a backup in this game. Suntarine Perkins has 30 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. And he has become that jack player, that player on the outside that's just a monster near the line of scrimmage that the defense has to constantly pay attention to, because if you don't, he will wreck the game. And he is likely going to be a backup because Ole Miss expects Princely Amamuelin to be back. He's listed as probable on the injury availability report. So when you look at what this defensive line, the advantage that they have over Oklahoma's offensive line, you have to wonder, what is Joe John Finley and Oklahoma going to do to try and offset that just a little bit? Because Ole Miss is one of the best teams in the country at getting to the quarterback. Oklahoma is one of the worst teams in the country in allowing people to get to the quarterback. Now, this could be a situation where it looks a lot like 2008 Ole Miss Mississippi State, where everybody was genuinely concerned for Wesley Carroll and Tyson Lee's health. But in this game, if Joe John Finley is smart, and I think he is, I mean, he coached at Ole Miss in 2020. He was on the staff. Lane Kiffin doesn't hire traditionally bad coaches. I think Joe John Finley is going to do what he can to offset that offensive line. And that means hitches. That means quick passes. That means stuff really close to the line of scrimmage. And as Jay Smith from Locked On Sooners yesterday said, there's going to be some duck and chucks involved as well. They've seen Ole Miss, they got penalties against Kentucky. That was the way that Kentucky was able to win that game, was honestly due to the defensive penalties, which Ole Miss, to their credit, over the last couple of weeks, they've done a pretty good job of correcting. But they're going to try. You're going to see some duck and chucks. You're going to see their best receiver come back into the fold. So there's going to be a matchup with him and Trey Amos that's going to be real. But secondary, they're down like their next 4 wide receivers currently. Listen, I made the joke yesterday on the show, and I mean it. The injury report that Oklahoma is putting out for their wide receiver unit and their offensive line unit is like getting a casualty report from the Battle of Antietam. They have been completely decimated on the offensive side of the ball by injuries. That's not their fault. That's just a horrible luck type situation. But they're also not helping themselves currently in the scheme. I don't think Seth Luttrell did a good job of being a physical running team and getting back to doing that. I think against Ole Miss, you're going to see Oklahoma force the run, and that is not necessarily to win this game. I don't think Oklahoma thinks they're going to win this game, but if they want to go to a bowl game and get ready for the future, you're going to see the Oklahoma Sooners, in a way, get that culture back involved of physically running the ball. Now, Gavin Sawchuk, it doesn't look like he's going to play. So another injury is going to happen to those Oklahoma Sooners. And Jay Smith says that if Ole Miss scores 17, they're going to win this game because he just doesn't see how the Oklahoma Sooners are going to score. So whenever you take into the fact that Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, this is a big weekend for Lane Kiffin recruiting-wise, by the way. Caleb Cunningham is going to be in town. Commitments there. They're getting ready for the signing day that doesn't really exist. There's no letter of intent anymore. So there's nothing to sign. Financial aid papers, you can sign multiple financial aid papers and be perfectly good to go. So you're not going to know who's going to be at your school until they enroll at your school. So keep that in mind when everybody starts losing their mind in December about anything. It just doesn't matter. But Ole Miss is recruiting, and it's like, always be recruiting, ABC. That is the story. And Ole Miss generally likes to throw the ball downfield and show off for Caleb Cunningham anytime he's on campus. And he's going to be on campus on Saturday. It should be really interesting to see. There's a lot of commits that's going to be on campus. Ole Miss has the big defensive line edge, and anytime you win the trenches in this league, you have an above average shot at winning the game. It's going to honestly fall on that offensive game plan and what they're going to do and how they're going to decide how to handle it. If Ole Miss does what they need to do offensively, they're going to score points, and this game is going to be unbelievably one-sided. It's a 20.5-point line. I mean, even Vegas thinks this game has a chance to get lopsided. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss. Up next, we wrap things up with our final thoughts on the game and reveal our official score prediction, who we expect to click this weekend. Do not miss it. Hello, NFL fans. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Ole Miss is currently favored by 20.5 points against the Oklahoma Sooners, as I just said. The over-under is only at 48.5. That is like a 34-14 or a 35-14 type football game with Ole Miss winning. That is what Vegas predicts in this game. And honestly, that might make a little bit of sense. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view latest play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so let's get back to some final thoughts on this game. And there's several things that's interesting to me. First of all, like I said before, Ole Miss is a 20.5-point favorite. The over-under is not moving. It's at 48.5. They're thinking 34-14, 35-14. That's kind of the realm of where Vegas thinks this game is going to lie. Period. So we'll see exactly what Ole Miss has in store for what is going on. 3 players that I think you need to watch for. First of all is Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, obviously, the quarterback, is going to be a very important piece. And with an offense that has been struggling, obviously, you need to look out for him. Chris Paul, he's an energy guy on the defense. I do expect a physical type running game. But if it comes down to throwing the football and Jackson Arnold and those guys having to throw the ball downfield, look for Ole Miss to get creative through the A-gaps and do all things to try kind of scheme against this offensive line. I think Chris Paul is going to play a major piece in that. And the last one is Juice Wells. This is the game that I expect Juice Wells to break out in. And this isn't about Trey Harris. This is just about Juice Wells. I think that Ole Miss using him and his run after the catch could be a major difference in unlocking this Oklahoma defense, especially an Oklahoma defense that, if Trey Harris plays, is going to be focused entirely on Trey Harris. Billy Bowman is constantly going to be looking that way. Somebody else is going to have to step up, and I think that somebody is going to be Juice Wells. Now, I think Caden Lee and I think Caden Priestcorn and Daquan Wright, they all have roles to play in this game. But I think Juice Wells, I like him to kind of make the step in this game. The final prediction I have in this game, I've changed it from yesterday on the show. The final prediction is Ole Miss 31, Oklahoma 10. I think Ole Miss bust one time to allow Oklahoma to score. I do not think it's going to be a running touchdown because Ole Miss has only given up one rushing touchdown this entire year. And offensively, Ole Miss is going to get on track. And I think the fourth quarter is going to be the slow quarter for Ole Miss. Should be pretty interesting and to see what happens. Now, other games that Ole Miss fans should probably start paying attention to this weekend. in the noon window. This is the same time that the Ole Miss Oklahoma game is playing. Just pay attention to the scores on this one. Notre Dame, number 12, is at number 24, Navy. Notre Dame is a 13.5-point favorite. It's at noon on ABC. This is preceding the SEC games as well. That's a big game because Notre Dame needs to take a loss, and this might be Notre Dame's last chance to take a loss, honestly, if we're going to be real about it. But for Ole Miss's sake, if you want to make the playoff and all of that stuff, you probably need to pay attention and root for Notre Dame to lose a game. The other one is Washington at Indiana. IU is a 6.5-point favorite. It is on the Big Ten Network at noon. Washington is going to be coming across country, but Indiana needs to drop a game, and Indiana will be without their starting quarterback, I believe, as well. So there's a chance that could happen. The other game that you should pay attention to is number 8 LSU at number 14 Texas A&M. Texas A&M is actually favored by 2.5 points. It's at 7:30 on ABC. Texas A&M needs to drop a game. LSU probably, if Ole Miss fans are comfortable with where they are, LSU probably needs to win this football game and not A&M. Just so everybody understands that as well. Lots of great football on tap this weekend. Ole Miss and Oklahoma. It's an 11 o'clock game in the Grove. I do feel bad for Oklahoma fans that are going to be coming into Oxford to see the Grove. They're going to see an 11 o'clock in the morning Grove, which is never the same thing as a 2:30 or even a night game as well. So I do apologize for that. The next time, hopefully it'll be a lot better, but I hope you have a good time. Oklahoma fans that are coming in that can't get tickets, you should be able to watch the game on the square if you're not going to watch it in a tent in the Grove. But if you can catch it on the square, like the Library and Funky's, they're usually open, a couple of bars on the square. Restaurants around Oxford are really good. And I think Oklahoma fans, if you can do it, if you're in on Friday, try to get into Ajax Diner. It's kind of legendary in the Oxford scene. And it's not off the beaten path like some of the other really good places in Oxford. So check that out as well. I'm really looking forward to this game. And this is why I think that Ole Miss should beat Oklahoma on Saturday. This isn't a program video. It's one of those things that I watch. It's a team video. The way this season has gone. Next season, I fully acknowledge when Ole Miss goes to Norman, it could look completely different. But this season, you have to deal with Walter Nolan. This season, you have to deal with Jackson Dart and Trey Harris and those guys on the field. And I think those guys are going to be the difference makers against the Oklahoma Sooners. We'll see what happens. Ole Miss is a 20.5-point favorite. The line hasn't been moving over the course of the week, so we'll see exactly how that goes. So, thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And also, exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss insider. It is the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It is a texting program that sends you notifications on everything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial. Experience the future of college sports coverage. We're constantly adding new perks as we grow, so don't miss out. The link is down in the description. For those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.